Chapter 30. Nearly 4 months had passed since Marta died in childbirth. Rennie never went a minute without thinking of his mate, his best friend since childhood. Marta was the only girlfriend Rennie ever had, and she brought him such joy. Now, his heart ached continuously. Since her death, he buried his head in his work at the store. Rennie could not make it through a day without breaking down in sorrow for his loss. He only got some relief when Dax stopped by the store to visit him. Dax was not family and did not participate in Rennie's wallowing in grief. So Rennie could take a mental vacation while Dax and he were together. Dax's humor gave him temporary relief from the pain plaguing him every minute of every day. Dax and Polly often discussed how they could get Rennie and Samantha interested in each other, but they thought it might be too soon for either of them to start something new. It was, however, not uncommon for Rennie to visit Dax at his home while Samantha visited Polly. Dax knew of another man interested in Samantha. Duggan Winnett, the owner of the sawmill in Conifer Cliffs, recently brought in a new mill manager, Marcus Olson. After getting familiar with Conifer Cliffs, Olson spent a lot of time thinking of reasons to go to the bank to see the pretty teller working there. Olson, always able to strike up a conversation with Samantha, found her usually too busy to accommodate him for very long. In his bank office, Dax pushed back his chair, stood up, and stretched, eyeing Olson at Samantha's window. Dax had just closed a loan on a ranch at Granite. It was a larger loan than he wanted to make, but after looking at the ranch, he felt that if the loan defaulted, it would be a ranch he would like to own. Dax needed a break this busy morning, so he walked down the street to see Rennie. "What's going on in here?" Dax asked, ambling into the general store. "Just trying to sell something," Rennie answered. "You know everything in here is for sale, don't you? Why don't you buy something?" "I just came here to bullshit." "Can you trade me something for bullshit?" Dax joked. "Sure, there's all that stuff in the garbage can. How much bullshit have you got?" Rennie laughed. "Enough to get some real good stuff. I have valuable bullshit, worth a lot more than a barrel of garbage." Dax was glad to see Rennie joking. "Well, now I know it's bullshit," Rennie said. "What can I do for you?" "Oh, nothing. I'm just tired of what I've been doing and needed a change of scenery," Dax replied. Soon, Marcus Olson walked into Rennie's store. His conversation with Samantha, if any, must have been short, Dax thought. Marcus was a tall, thin, blue-eyed blonde man with a very white Scandinavian complexion. He looked at Dax, whom he had met before as the banker in town. "Can you tell me about the pretty blonde girl who works in your bank?" he asked. "What do you want to know?" Dax asked. "Everything you can tell me," Olson replied. "She's not quite 20 yet. She's recently widowed. She's a good friend of my wife's, and she's beautiful. That's all there is to know," Dax said bluntly. "I want to buy her the biggest, most expensive box of chocolates you can find," Olson said to Rennie. "I'll have to ask Ted to do that. He will know where to find what you are looking for," Rennie replied. "He should be back in a couple of hours." "Thanks, I'll check back with you. I got to go," Olson said, heading out the door. "That guy has a good idea, Rennie, but that box of chocolates needs to be from you, not from him," Dax pointed out seriously. "I don't want to piss off a customer," Rennie replied. "To hell with him," Dax exclaimed. "Rennie, you don't want to miss out on Samantha. She's a good girl, and whether you know it or not, you need a good girl, and she needs a good manual." "Geez, Dax, I think you're right, but I'm not sure if she's ready. What do you think?" "Let me talk to Polly and see what she says." "She'll know," Dax replied. 4 days later, Ted returned from Brookston with the biggest box of the finest chocolates he could find. Rather than tell Olson, Rennie asked Dax to invite both him and Samantha to dinner, setting the stage for him to give her the chocolates. Polly was excited to accommodate breaking the ice, so her friends may have a chance to start something special. After a dinner of rack of lamb with mint sauce furnished by Rennie and cooked by Polly, Rennie presented Samantha with the chocolates. The gesture surprised her. Samantha didn't know how to react. But after a long talk with Polly, she opened up to Rennie. The two started spending time together, sharing past sorrows and future dreams. With that accomplished, Dax returned to the chore of looking for hay and made a trip to Granite with that in mind. On his return trip, he brought Walter, Jack, and Colm back to Conifer Cliffs for the weekend. He charged Cole with helping Walter and Jack feel comfortable in the town among so many new people. Dax put them up in the hotel on Friday night and gave Cole money for him to buy all their meals at Dyson's. On Saturday morning, Dax took all three of them to Rennie's store and bought new clothes for Jack and Walter. Colm was surprised to see Samantha hanging around with Rennie at the store, and more surprised to see them having dinner together with baby Collis at Dyson's that evening. On Sunday evening, Dax and Polly returned the boys to Alton Coulter's ranch at Juniper Junction. Sarah arranged for Walter and Jack to start school there on Monday, March 31st, 1924. After a whirlwind romance between two mourning souls, Rennie proposed to Samantha. Not wanting to hear the community gossip about seeing her with Rennie before his wife and her husband's bodies cooled off, and have them think she was having an affair, Samantha and Rennie were married on Saturday, June 7, 1924. Dax was the best man, and Polly was the maid of honor. Cole walked his sister down the aisle. Quinn came home for the wedding and announced his recent high school graduation and enlistment into the U.S. Navy. Chapter 31. Throughout the 20s, Conifer Cliffs bustled with activity and new jobs, thanks in large part to Dax and Rennie. But in the spring of 1930, after Black Tuesday's stock market crash, the fruitful roaring 20s came to a screeching halt. Times were tough all over for the next 10 years. However, Dax remained unscathed. He bought more land, 3 failing sawmills, and large tracts of timberland at bargain basement prices. Everything Dax touched turned to gold. But it was Dax's trust in Fred Larson's financial expertise and experience that enabled Dax's empire to grow exponentially. He owned ranches, banks, and sawmills on the Clear River at Conifer Cliffs, Granite, and north to the high country in Falcon Falls. He ran 3,500 mother cows, and he employed Amos Clark and Alton Coulter to look after the crew's farming and putting up hay for winter's feed. Dax placed Colm Smith in charge of the cows and presented him with a new 1929 model, a Ford pickup, to travel to all the ranches. In turn, Colm hired Josh Leader, also single, to help him cowboy. Colm was 22. He had not yet married, but was still interested in both Betty Leiter and Laura Dyson. Samantha and Rennie celebrated their 6th wedding anniversary. Rennie's son, Collis, was now 7 years old. With Samantha's help, Rennie's store prospered as a fully stocked grocery, meat, dry goods, and hardware store. Ted Nelson stayed on to supply the gray hair and help the store continue to flourish. Marta's father, Connell, and her 24-year-old brother, Amel, ran the slaughterhouse, dairy, and meat market with the help of her 22-year-old sister, Emily. Rennie's brother Billy, 18, drove to Brookston daily to pick up and deliver inventory. Ted now ordered from his vendors over the phone. Samantha and Florissa Kelly, Rennie's sister, 20, helped customers, stocked shelves, and took turns as checkers. Rennie's operation ran like a well-oiled machine, and he realized he had to cut his profit margins to keep customers coming back, as times had become tough during the Depression. Luckily, the people of Conifer Cliffs were not deeply in debt because Dax's bank had not allowed them to be. Dax did not overextend the bank's resources, and his banks remained stable. Dax encouraged anyone not comfortable with his or her money in one of his banks to take it out. As banks folded nationwide, all 3 of Dax's banks remained economically solid. Walter Card, now 18, farmed for Alton. Jack, now 14 and in the 7th grade, also worked for Alton. Both Alton and Sarah were happy they kept these orphans and helped them grow up. But they made sure the boys understood they could not have done it without Dax's help. They also made sure the boys knew they had always pulled their own weight and were appreciated. When Jack wasn't with his friends stealing moonshine, tipping over outhouses, and raising any kind of hell they could think of, he worked hard trying to prove he was the best worker at whatever task he was given. Dax got Jack out of small trouble now and then, but was glad Jack had the opportunity to have some kid fun. Jack Card graduated from the 8th grade in 1932 at the age of 16. By then, Walter was 20 and worked on a MC Catron Lumber Company logging crew supplying logs to the company's sawmills in Falcon Falls and Granite. Walter convinced Jack to leave Juniper Junction and come to work with him at the company town Dax had named Polly near Falcon Falls. Although it was Depression times, Dax sold pine lumber to make fruit boxes and a few other items unrelated to the totally stagnant building industry. Jack quickly became a seasoned lumberjack and continued to be one of Dax's two favorite young up-and-comers, the other being Cole. With the untimely death of Roger Martin, Thomas Quigley became the sole owner of the establishments near each of Dax's sawmills, which supplied alcohol and female entertainment. Although Dax was not part of Thomas's business endeavors, he was glad to have these establishments near his mills, as they helped retain manpower in the area. On December 5, 1933, Congress repealed the 18th Amendment, which had led to the enactment of Prohibition. Now, even more men flocked to Thomas's bars and hotels to drink and see the girls. Samantha continued to be repulsed by the handsome young man who once swept her off her feet. However, she understood how Thomas's businesses benefited the local economy, so she was always polite to him. In the spring of 1934, Laura Dyson felt she had waited all her life to marry Colm Smith. They were both now 24. Laura knew Colm had romanced another girl in the Bitterroot. That seemed to be common knowledge to everyone who knew Colm. Finally, Laura could stand it no more and gave Colm an ultimatum. If he didn't marry her, she would no longer wait for him. He did not acknowledge or respond to the ultimatum. He thought if he ignored it, it would go away. 2 weeks later, while eating dinner at Dyson's Cafe, Laura handed him an invitation to her wedding to a CCC boy from Georgia, whom Colm had never heard of. He was shocked. He met her coming out of the cafe after work and begged her not to marry this new guy. "I have waited for you for 24 years, and you wouldn't marry me, so I made other plans," she pouted. "But you're my best friend. You've always been my best friend," he pleaded. "You can still be my friend. You owned my heart for so long, but you didn't give it what it needed. You starved my heart, Colm, and someone else came along and fed it what it needed. Come on, Laura. You can't ignore that we have been in love for years," Colm persisted. "If you love me, why did you have a girl down in the Bitterroot? And why didn't you nurture our relationship?" She scoffed. "Come on, Laura." He tried to convince her, still not giving her a definitive commitment. "Too late, buddy. You had years to do what needed to be done, but it's too late now," she sobbed. "Okay, let's get married then," he proclaimed, trying to save what he could. "It's too late, and I don't know if you even know or care about how to take care of my heart," she said through her tears, kissing his cheek and walking away. She left him standing by the water tower where they had shared many kisses. Colm always thought Laura would wait for him forever. Laura had always been his best friend. He could talk to her when he could talk to no one else. He didn't want anyone else to touch her. She was his girl, he figured. She had always been his girl. On the weekend Laura got married, Colm drove his Model A pickup to Florence in the Bitterroot. Although he barely nurtured a relationship with Betty Leiter, he didn't want to take the chance of losing the other girl he cared about. Instead of the warm welcome at Florence he expected from Betty, he was met by the news of her soon-to-happen wedding. He pleaded with her to marry him, just as he had with Laura, but received a similar response to the one Laura had given him. He was too late with too little to salvage anything from either relationship. After thinking for a few days, Colm drove to Juniper Junction on the pretense of visiting Alton, who was putting up hay for the winter. But it was the cute 23-year-old girl there he really wanted to see. All the winters he had boarded with Coulters, he had never thought of a serious relationship with Kana. But now he felt desperate. He convinced both Kana and her parents to let her drive to Falcon Falls with him to check on the cattle there, assuring Alton and Sarah there would be separate accommodations for her when night came. Kana was on cloud 9. She fell in love with him the first time she saw the soaking wet cowboy 10 years before, when he came into her family's home to get warm and dry off. Even though he never paid too much attention to her, she always hoped someday he would. When night fell, they both ignored the promises made to her folks. Colm and Kana were married 30 days later. Kana's younger brother, Sean Coulter, was the best man, and Samantha was the maid of honor. Dax hosted a surprise wedding party, inviting everyone from the surrounding communities. Kana was more than just a little happy. She was now Colm's wife. After years of not having a woman's touch, Kana restored the John and Elaine Smith home to its former splendor. Chapter 32. When Dax arrived at the bank on Monday after Colm's Sunday wedding, a U.S. Marshal waited for him. After introducing himself and showing his badge, the man said, "I am here to investigate torn, blood-stained bills coming from this bank that have been returned to the Federal Reserve for replacement. What do you want to know about them?" Dax asked. "Mostly, we want to know whose blood is on them and how it got there," the marshal replied. Dax's quick wit told him to tell a partial truth and try to make it funny. "It was my money. I brought it to Montana from New York when I moved here. Before I bought the bank, I had nowhere to hide it, so I buried it in the ground on a mountain nearby. While I was away, a big, ugly squirrel dug a hole and made a nest in the bag the money was in. When I came back to get it, I shot the squirrel, and he went down his hole and bled out on the money he shredded to make a nice bed for himself. So, the blood is the squirrel's blood?" the marshal asked. "And the squirrel is the one who tore up the bills, and you tried to put them together again?" "Yes, that's what happened," Dax replied, hoping the conversation didn't go any further. "I'm going to have the blood analyzed to see if your story is true, and if it isn't, you may be in a lot of trouble. I have nothing to be afraid of if some laboratory has tests to determine what species the blood is," Dax said confidently. "We'll be in touch," the marshal said. Back in Skokie, Illinois, Chester Irwin, now a very old man, sat in the pool hall with his old friend Jess Phillips, drinking his morning coffee and smoking cigarettes. After a long draw on his Camel, Chester leaned back in his chair. He'd been thinking about a certain person for a very long time. Finally, Chester leaned forward and stated the question long on his mind. "I wonder if those two cops ever caught up with that young hobo who bought new clothes from you and a new Chevrolet from me to drive to Montana." The end this story continues in Cold Creek Book 2 of the Conifer Cliffs series.